everyone, and welcome to our second protocol working group meeting. My name is Ori, and I'm a technical program manager from Pagoda. And I'm very excited to kick off this group for the second time and discuss a protocol proposal today. So just to go over the agenda, first, I will give a quick overview on developer governance, which includes our NEP process and working groups. Next, we'll do some brief introductions as we have a few panelists joining us today. Then we'll get into the main discussion, which is NEP-366, meta transactions. And then we will open it up to Q&A. And lastly, we'll talk about next steps and how you can get involved in developer governance. And if at any time you have questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A button on the screen or in the chat, and we'll try to get to them if they're relevant or wait until the end. All right, so let's start with a little bit of background on developer governance. So over the last few months, we've been engaging with the community over this idea of developer governance, which is about decentralizing NER's development and empowering anyone to contribute to evolving the ecosystem. And we've been bucketing developer governance into three stages: ideas, voting, and implementation. And I just wanted to quickly highlight them to help contextualize our meeting today. So first, ideas. Anyone can submit an idea for improving the protocol or standards. And it starts with the community, from individual builders and developers to groups. And there have been several community groups that have self-organized around various topics of interest, such as zero knowledge, wallet standards, and others. And many of them have already been meeting regularly. They've started Telegram channels to communicate. And you're welcome to join any of these community groups or to start one yourself. You can learn more on ner.org/developer governance. And once you have an idea, you can submit it through a NEP. So a NEP, a NER enhancement proposal, enables anyone to submit a proposal. And this is a similar process to other prominent open source projects like Rust. And as we've been getting many NEP submissions, it's been really exciting to see the contribution from the community, but it also made us realize that we needed a way to move them forward, to review them, to make decisions, and determine the next steps so that they're not just sitting indefinitely. So this is where the second voting stage comes in, which involves developer working groups. And the working groups really is a way to help operationalize the review of NEPs. And the idea is to have multiple working groups, each one focusing on a specific ecosystem need, and to have subject matter experts in that group that can help create focus and enable us to move faster. And we've already kicked off the first three working groups to help bootstrap the process. So protocol working group, contract standards working group, and wallet standards. And as I mentioned earlier, we're here to iterate today on the protocol working group. And putting these groups into practice is very much a gradual approach and requires flexibility as we learn what works and what doesn't. But as we continue to iterate, we really want to introduce more groups and empower the community to run them. So just to highlight the roles that are involved in the NEP process, there are four key ones. First, the author or the champion. This is the person who writes the proposal and moves it forward, presents it to the working group. Then there's the moderator. This is the person who facilitates the process and helps validate that the proposal meets the NEP guidelines and that everything is moving along. The reviewer, subject matter expert, is a person who gets assigned to assess the technical feasibility of the NEP. And then lastly, the approver, working group members, that's the group that makes the ultimate decision. And just to help illustrate the process, so basically we have three stages: draft, review, and voting, and two outcomes: approved and rejected. And all of the roles mentioned before help move the NEP through these stages and towards the outcome. And most of this activity happens asynchronously on the NEP itself. But when we do get to the voting stage, each working group has a public meeting to discuss the NEP with the author and to formalize the decision, which is exactly what we are doing here today. So we will execute this process and look at the proposal that has been in the review stage and have the author present it and then go into the voting. But before we jump into that part, I also want to just talk about what happens when NEPs get approved. So that leads us to the third implementation stage. And we're currently working on an overarching DAO, which will be responsible for funding distribution from the NER Foundation and other orgs And really the idea is that anyone can volunteer to propose to implement an agreed proposal for free or even for a compensation. And we'll be sharing more information on that soon on the developer governance website. So just to put it all together, we have the community which submit ideas using NEPs, working groups which vote on those NEPs and help to move them forward, and implementers who help implement NEPs for the benefit of the entire community. So with that overview, I'd like to jump into the introductions, and I would like to welcome the working group members and introduce them first. So Bowen, I'll hand it over to you.
Hey everyone, I'm Bowen, head of protocol at Pagoda. Yeah, very excited to be here and discussing the meta transaction proposal.
So what was the sequence?
I think I don't see Marcelo, so let's skip to Marcin.
Hi, I'm Marcin. I'm also from Pagoda, and super excited to see new, very exciting additions coming to new.
Cool. Hi, I'm Alex Kioki. I'm a ecosystem member. Been involved in Web3 for a few years. Used to work at an exchange and a few other open source ecosystems. Have more of a product background than a developer background. So we'll be helping provide some feedback from that lens.
Hi everyone, Marcelo here. It was hard to speak before being a panelist. I'm working with Aurora and happy to discuss meta transactions today, finally. Yeah.
Awesome. Glad you all are here. All right, next, I would like to introduce the moderators in the process. So Max.
Hey everyone, I'm Butterfly on the Wall, don't mind me. I hope Ori and Vlad Frolov will do most of the work here for me today. Yeah, and I'm just, I don't know, what am I doing here? Making sure the decorum is observed.
Hey everybody, I'm Vlad. I'm also on the moderator side of things, helping Ori with the technical side of writing NEPs through, and today we'll just keep an eye on the technical aspects of the discussion. So keep it straight. Let's not jump into holy wars. Ori.
Awesome. Hi again, I'm Ori, and yes, I also play a moderator role in the process, and very excited to keep on moving. So, all right, now super exciting. We have the NEP author and champions who worked on meta transactions. So I'd like to introduce Ilya.
Hey everyone. Ilya, yeah, originated NEP as this is something we've probably discussed very early on, but never actually designed the protocol. And so it was exciting kind of to actually start the work and then see Igor and Alexander to pick it up and actually get it hopefully to production soon.
I am Igor. I implemented this NEP. I am just a developer in our project, so that's all.
I'm a near Ukraine member, Rust developer, and ex-city of the central bank, developer of USense stablecoin smart contracts. Helped Yegor in all discussions with this NEP, trying to push it forward. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, and that's actually a perfect segue to the main discussion, which is the NEP itself. So yeah, I'd like to invite you back again, Alexander, to provide an overview of the NEP and why you believe it is important. And really any author or champion who's worked on it is welcome to speak. But yeah, Alexander, I will hand it over to you to start.
Yeah, thank you, Ori. And my plan is to share background a little bit and give just a quick refresh about meta transactions. So I'd like to start with a little background. Ilya is an original creator of the NEP, and which was published in June 2022. The NEP had received initial review. At that time, we in the central bank thought about business case, like how could we enable people with the lack of native near coin to be able to transfer a stable coin and a USN stablecoin in particular, and any fungible token in general. like USDT, USDC. So that was our specific use case. So while meta transactions enable even more use cases, like the ability to interact with any smart contract, having no near coins at all to pay gas. And so we analyzed a few options, mostly workarounds, and how could it be done without fundamental support by near blockchain. And we arrived at the conclusion that it's just impossible to implement any workaround, like without giving up security and usability due to lack of trust between all parties. And at that time, we found this NEP of meta transactions, and I decided to contribute to the NEP development because like we thought that it is a proper fundamental way to move forward. It gives an ability to interact with any smart contract, having no near coins at all to pay gas. And like, so yeah, on the next slide, demonstrates, we have this pull request with the draft implementation, which is actually on the final stage. And there is a diagram with a lot of stuff is going on there. And yeah, this slide is just to demonstrate that it's not just an app, but we also have a draft implementation, which is, I personally believe it is cool. And the diagram is quite complicated. That's why I created more simple diagrams on the next slide, so you can go forward. So there is an oversimplified problem statement. What happens if user doesn't have native near coin? Such user is kind of fully limited. The user is not able to do anything. The user is just doomed to find anybody to get a little bit of native money to, to continue its own stuff, its own work. And on the next slide, having meta transactions, the user is more happy, right? And we introduced a native support from near blockchain, and with additional enablement with special entities, which called relayers. So many different use cases could be solved. The user initiates a meta transaction while relayer pays for gas. So fundamentally, meta transaction is a protocol feature when a third party can pay gas for another party. And that's it. And some corner cases and security concerns are to be addressed by relayer implementation. That's all from my side. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Alexander. Does any other author or champion want to add anything at this point before we move to the actual discussion of the concerns or benefits and decision?
I can add more context on kind of the use cases, right? The kind of high level, we always been trying to figure out how to hide blockchain and offer easier to use experience. And although we've designed an account model with a lot of flexibility to do that, the reality has been to implement something like this, you need to deploy a proxy contract on an account and then still have a relayer. And so the only real case where this actually worked so far is in case of Aurora, with Aurora Plus, where the whole Aurora is a proxy contract. And so Aurora Plus actually showed a really interesting experience where you can, for example, stake the token or prepay or potentially some other way kind of have a business relationship with the relayer, and then the relayer pays for all your actual on-chain transactions. And that provides just a better experience, kind of hides a lot of blockchain complications. And similar use cases are Sweatcoin and others where they kind of hide the blockchain from the user and then have a business case and kind of charge the user in some way later. in the business relationship. So generally speaking, this is kind of a broadly applicable change that a lot of different partners or that already exist on the blockchain can use.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that context. Super helpful. So with that, I'd like to now invite one of the working group members, Bowen, to kind of summarize some of the benefits and concerns that we saw while looking at that NEP in the public discussion. So Bowen, hello.
Hey, yeah, so just a quick summary of the benefits. Is already being mentioned, this NEP would allow a third party to pay transaction fees on behalf of users. And that's the main point of the meta transaction proposal. And also it's implemented on the protocol level and automatically works for all smart contracts. So if you are a dApp developer, you don't necessarily have to think about, for example, deploying another proxy contract, like some other, like how meta transaction is implemented on some other blockchains. So basically, it's like a blanket implementation that would work for everyone. And also, yeah, enables a lot of future possibilities and makes onboarding very easy. For example, if you're a new user, you don't necessarily now have to worry about first acquiring NEAR to start interacting with different applications on NEAR. I mean, obviously, in order for that to happen, there's some additional steps that need to be made, but meta transaction would be a great first step towards that direction. Okay. So I think there were a lot of back and forth discussions on the meta transaction support for implicit account, especially on the question of nonces. So I think the decision is that in this proposal specifically, NEP-366, that will not be implemented because there's still some discussion still going on there. And this will instead be addressed in a future NEP. And the current meta transaction implementation would already allow us to test not just the feature itself, but also all the other toolings and relayers and other implementation in different tools, maybe integration with other products like wallets and so on. And while we're still figuring out, while the community is still figuring out what to do with the implicit accounts. Okay, so yeah, that's a summary of the benefits and concerns for the for this NEP.
There is a question in the chat from Evgeny, so I will just read it out loud so we are on the same page. The question is: this only applies to implicit accounts that don't exist on chain, right?
If the question is about the concern, yes.
And another point that Evgeny mentioned that he left a couple of messages on the GitHub itself, and I see that there is still ongoing discussion there happening today, even just before the meeting. So I hope the community will address them and mention them right now, maybe out loud. If you want to speak, just raise your hands and we'll bring you into panelist probably.
So the first of my concerns is that we need so-called domain separation for signatures, and what this means is that if we have different types of things that are signed with the same key, we need to make sure that it's not possible to interpret one kind of thing with a different kind of thing, because different parts of code don't know about each other. In particular, we have actual transactions signed with account keys. We have some network level messages, and now we are discussing introducing a different kind of thing, a meta transaction. And here, like the proposal currently says, we are just serializing a different structure, but because Borscht doesn't include any type information in the serialization, we basically can't guarantee that one kind of structure can't be deserialized as a different kind of structure. So if we have a valid signature on chain, it can be potentially abused by someone to be interpreted as a signature of something entirely different. And maybe in this particular case, this can't be done, but what I see that there are also other proposals that involve signing things with account keys. Like there was a proposal that initially involved just signing some JSON with account keys, and who knows if JSON can be interpreted as Borsch or some.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. The concern that was raised in the chat is, are you sure that you're talking about the meta transactions and not the verify owner NEP?
I am talking in a sense about both. So in verify owner, there was proposal to sign JSON. Here there is proposal to sign Borsch, but transactions, normal transactions, not meta transactions, are also Borsch, and they have different structure, and there is no guarantee that you can't potentially interpret one structure as a different structure, because I think both are variable lengths, because they have lists of actions.
Let's not dive into very neat details. I see that Alexander has raised hand, and I'd like the author to address it.
Yeah, we saw that comment of 4 points. You addressed 4 points discussed with Igor. I would say that they are almost about implementation part, because I feel NEP is not so specific, and it is good that it is about the implementation part. It means that we moved forward, far forward. And first point about signature could be, I believe, could be pretty easily addressed, and we will address this. This is actually a good point. And other points, they are considered, just not always explicitly described, so I believe we will address your points, Evgeny, later, a little bit later. But anyways, I just to share, a context with people who didn't see that comment, I just wanted to say that we discussed, and I feel like everything is kind of addressable.
Okay, so to be clear, I am not against the idea of having meta transaction per se. So if we are currently only voting on some high level idea of introducing this kind of actions, this is probably fine. But then I thought we are actually voting on specific protocol change, and protocol change includes like the details about format of messages and stuff. And then there is another issue that I didn't explicitly mention on GitHub that I think about. So in response to one of the comments that we would like, the plan is to have a payment as the first action in this meta transaction so that the relayer can ensure that they get paid. So I see this problem. In its delegate action, there is a single receiver for all of its sub-actions. But for the payment with the token is a function call to the token contract. But the real action that the user wants to do probably has some different destination account. So both cannot be included in the same delegate action. And so how would you make sure that the relayer gets paid in this case?
I can give a feedback. Just a few days ago, we written down a few use cases involving meta transactions, and they're quite different. For instance, there is one use case when user wants to transfer fungible token, paying a fee with the same fungible token, and it actually easily maps on the meta transactions because the receiver is the same. Fees in USDT and actual FT transaction is in USDT. So it's kind of easiest case. And there are cases which are kind of more difficult when fee is in USDT, in stablecoin, and actual destination is another smart contract, for instance, when person doing some task. And it's more difficult, however, it's feasible. But I mean, what I want to say that there are different use cases with a little bit different implementation nuances, I would say. So we can just right now it's not feasible to cover all cases. I even believe that meta transaction is a kind of fundamental feature, and when we map this meta transaction different decentral apps, we find even more use cases which we couldn't be foreseen at this moment. And then we will find a way to apply. That's it.
Okay, I see, but having this, like the actual action to be a payment using the same token as used to pay the fee, I see this as a rather special case. Like in the general case, the destination account will be different. So I don't see how you can do this using this proposal, and to actually fix this, maybe you need some per action destination account or something. This will be a quite significant change.
Yeah, I would think to expand on that, it's probably the more generic case would be to have multiple delegate actions that can be executed together, and changing from one delegate action to multiple delegate actions will require a pretty significant change to the protocol again. And so if that's the direction this is trending, it would make sense to do it in one.
Okay. Well, thank you, Evgeny, for surfacing those concerns. And I think the working group members who have already reviewed the NEP and have given their consideration can take that into account right now as they're trying to decide how to move forward. So I think just due to time, I would like to propose that we move to the next step and kind of go through each working group member and kind of present sort of your voting indication and maybe if it has changed based on the conversation we just had or not. So yeah, basically moving to the voting stage unless anyone has any other major concerns they'd like to raise before.
So just to clarify, with the current implementation, meta transactions work only when the relayer gets paid in the same, let's call it token or FT token that is transferring, right?
So basically you can only, using meta transaction, you can only transfer the tokens that you are using to pay the relayer or do any other function call to this token. So it can be transfer call, for example, that can call something else through the transfer.
So I mean, but that also that is if you want to make the payment in the same transaction.
Yeah, but I think the point is it's just not generic enough, and like making it instead of delegating action batch or something would pretty much expand its capability without changing much in the current design.
Okay, so I guess Bowen, could you maybe start by presenting like how are you feeling about the NEP as it currently stands and your sort of voting indication?
Yeah, I think the current NEP is a good first step towards everything we need, not just for meta transactions, but in general improving the onboarding experience for NEAR. Yeah, so while I think there are problems that needs to be addressed, like the implicit account problem and also this payment problem that Evgeny just brought up. I would vote for accepting this NEP and then have future NEPs that are about those addressing those more those problems in an incremental way.
Okay. Great. Marcian, looks like you're thinking, so maybe we'll come back to you. Maybe Marcelo, you want to go next?
Yeah. Well, I feel somehow similar to Owen. It doesn't feel completely good, only accepting this particular use case where we strive to have like a fully fledged meta transactions. I've been following mostly all these proposals, how this is going on in Ethereum, but of course it's completely different than here due to the asynchronous environment. And yeah, somehow it's interesting that we never thought about this before during the whole process. In any case, I lean towards approving here, since this anyway it's useful as it stands today. And I like the proposal that Max wrote in the chat, that we should have this in mind in the sense that we should be able to grade it later, right? One comment, I see this comment from Ilya, that it's also, by the way, posted for host and panelists. So Ilya, you might repost it again to everyone. Ilya said we can just make delegate action to have a list of receiver ID actions, but will this work if the receiver ID is in different charts? It's the same problem, right?
It would work, yeah, because so the way it works, the delegate action is pretty much the relayer sends it from its account, it goes to the user account, and then that account unpacks it into actual actions, and then from there it will create receipts pretty much to other receiver IDs. Also, I mean, there's another option, which is user just signs two different delegate actions, and then relayer sends them only if it gets two. But I mean, that's just more, I mean, so the current implementation is this, but it's just more annoying. And given the synchronicity, can create a little bit more questions around like front running stuff.
Well, two different delegation actions would need the user to rely on to trust the relayer, basically. Yes. That it will not just send one and then ignore the second.
Exactly. Yeah. But yeah, I think making receiver ID actions into a list and just when the delegate action gets unpacked should allow for the flexibility that was asked for.
Okay. Marcin?
So one thing I feel strange that we didn't think about this limitation before. It kind of comes up here, which kind of rains a little bit on the parade. Because on one side, I really like the whole notion behind the meta transaction, but with this thing, it feels very limited. And normally I would say like, hey, give us 48 hours to like take another look to see if there is maybe a similar fix to something like Ilya was suggesting, whatnot, to make it a little bit more general. Because the scenario I want to avoid is us rolling out, one thing, and then literally like in the next NEP changing that, and then because this is protocol, we have to support both versions forever, and that's the biggest kind of cost. So here I would say like I know, or if you have such option of like, hey, can we like postpone the voting by 48 hours and like take another good look to see if there's, because the way I'm thinking about it is like this: either there is quote an easy fix. I mean, they're never easy, but like let's say something that we like, yeah, if we add this, then suddenly it opens up more, or we come to a conclusion like, no, such a thing would be like far more complex. So, would be a drastic change to NEP. And in the second scenario, then I'm fine with going with this as the first version. But if it's the first option, if it's quote just enough changing something or adding something there, then suddenly it would open up more use cases while not forcing us to support both versions kind of forever.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can definitely explore like conditional approval, because it sounds like there's already like 2/3 of the working group members that are leaning with approval. So if there's like, we approve, but we want to see X, Y, and Z sort of addressed, I think that would be an acceptable path, at least with our current NEP process. Yeah.
But what I'd like to also maybe invite the authors to speak. Maybe they already thought about the general use cases, whether it would be a major like feature, or your use cases that you had in mind do not need this general implementation?
I probably can make some at some points that first of all, I just can say that we were running cycles with all these use cases, and they're pretty much a big count of them. And we found that it's almost impossible to make at least one step with this NEP, trying to implement everything all together. So we decided to just to make one step, to be able to make a second step later. And I believe, like, how I see at this SNAP is this is a feature that allows for somebody paying gas, for another party, and which is not possible without the NEP. And the second point is that just a short summary of all our discussions is that without this feature, it's really hard to implement it in a feasible way to make it trustworthy, to make it secure, with no with no problems for user. Because if we see, like, my personal opinion about Aurora Plus, it's kind of, you have registration forms, you have they just pay nears for 2 accounts, and everybody trusts everybody, and all this is kind of is doomed. So that's how I see this NEP.
Marcin, yeah.
Alex, to be fair, it's not an attack on you in any way. Anyway, and I'm as I said,
yes, sure.
I fully support it. I just want to make sure, because again, myself, I feel stupid that we didn't think about this. While again, I've been looking at this for months basically. And
I mean, just that thing is that when, like, okay, let's take another 24 hours. That was our state during a few months. It's like, all right, we almost done with everything. Just let's take another 24 hours and trying to predict everything. It's quite hard. Yeah, but thanks.
Yeah. Well, and this NEP process and working groups is something that we're still bootstrapping, as I mentioned at the start. So this is absolutely, it feels natural for this to come up. And, yes, ideally we'd be able to kind of uncover some of these in our async discussions on the NEP, or jump on calls where needed. But I think it's absolute, like, we want to make sure we're making good decisions. And yeah, if we need to do some sort of extension to kind of address these concerns that are being raised and kind of revote, I think we can definitely look at that. And I think that's a healthy outcome. Marcelo, I see your hand, so please go ahead.
Yeah, so let me speak not as a working group member, but as a Aurora member right now. This is a feature that we've been looking for some time. We have already these kind of meta transactions enabled with Aurora Plus inside Aurora. We have been thinking about how we can make this better for future plans, like, let's say, if there were to be multiple instances of Aurora or whatnot. So this is a feature that we're actually looking forward, and I need to think a little bit about it, but I think as it stands today, it's probably not, we cannot use it as it is. So I'm highlighting this because this is one use cases of one ecosystem partner that, I mean, might worth think a little bit through it. And separate stuff, do we have here, like is this the proper context to discuss a little bit about this, or is it better to leave the discussion onto the GitHub? What do you think, Ari?
I mean, I think ideally we make the discussion public on GitHub, but if it starts becoming circular and we're not actually able to make any progress, there is a process in the NEP that sort of recommends for whoever is having the back and forth to actually jump on a call to flush it out. So it might be that, and we can make it public as well. So if anyone else is interested, they can certainly join. So yeah, I would say that if there needs to be a follow-up with a few people to hash it out, that's totally fine. But again, we want to, as Ilya was just mentioning, like, this is part of the process. It's complex, and we don't want to be in a situation where we end up going in circles for a month on it, for months. So we need to sort of figure out like what actually are we accepting, what's acceptable to move forward with and what's not. So yeah, so let's see, maybe sync pre-review of ongoing NEPs would be good to have broader brainstorm earlier. Yeah. So, and thank you for those points. We're actually working on, we just set up a Twitter account recently to create more visibility on everything that's going on, but we also want to give better visibility on the specific NEPs. So there is a board on GitHub that kind of outlines all the NEPs and their statuses, and you can filter them by categories, but we're also going to be launching a regular update, like a newsletter or some kind of feed. So yeah. All right. So just for this particular NEP that we're in, I guess, Max, Vlad, do you want to sort of step in to kind of give your recommendation here? I mean, do we want to do a delay of 72 hours and vote async on the NEP and kind of try to address any of the concerns that were raised? Is there, yeah.
Yeah, I think it sounds like people have pretty clear idea how to generalize this meta transaction to address the current concerns. Like it's a pretty straightforward and ambiguous thing to do. There was some proposals from Ilya, exactly what to do. And this sounds to be doable within like 3 days. So let's do that. Let's say like authors, Alexander, Igor, and I don't know whether you are going to have time for this, but Alexander and Igor, you're the primary drivers here. Please address that, plug in the list wherever there is no list in this spec, and yeah, and let's wrap it up within 72 hours, because it doesn't sound like we have other concerns besides this one. And also, of course, make the structures upgradable. Used all this Rust tagged union so that if we do miss something, we can upgrade it without introducing more meta transactions or other things into our protocol spec. Yeah, and that is it. But we do need to time box it 72 hours. And if it sounds like we cannot figure it out within 72 hours, then we consider this protocol's the spec to be too ambiguous. And that we have a process for this in the NEP, which means we come back in some time later. So let's try to crunch it into 72 hours.
So like if we cannot figure it out in 72 hours, I think there's also a question of like, do we just accept the current version, or will the current version, will the others have to submit, basically restart the NEP process again? I think that is also not completely clear.
I would say
restart.
What
you guys as the working group members could vote right now, and I would say that moderators shouldn't make too much weight here. So it's up to the protocol team then to how to maintain it in the future, and how that will affect all the, like, you should weigh the risk of splitting the ecosystem in the future, like burden of the maintenance as well. Yeah.
I think in this regard, Vlad, I think like if there is any chance in 72 hours to have a much more better version of this proposal, it will be very much appreciated. Like I do stand by my word of like, I lean towards approving this as it is today because it's unblocking some stuff, it's unblocking some use cases, but I know complexity is a big thing. Like that's basically the main reason why if 2.0 doesn't exist today. And like we don't want that to bite us, as in near complexity. So if we can make it simpler in 72 hours, it's better than voting today. Like if we vote no today, it's basically no. It's basically like we need to restart the process. But if we vote yes, like what will be the implications? That's the question. So I do like the proposal of delaying this by 72 hours in particular. And the other thing is that we might vote for some high-level proposal, as in meta transactions with this particular feature solved, but this is assuming that we will be able to solve it in 72 hours.
So I guess one lesson learned here is that for future NEPs, we should spend a little bit more effort on the limitations. Because here we just said there was just one line saying like, oh, it will not work for implicit accounts, but we should have we should actually spend more effort to be like, hey, what else? What are other boundaries for the project? Yeah, and make sure that we somehow propagate it properly so people like Evgeny can chime in earlier.
Yeah, these are all really good learnings, and happy to see engagement. And we've been trying to figure out how to create that engagement. We're reaching out to people, we're circulating as much as we can, and I think like today's kind of making us all realize, hey, if we're going to be making decisions on some of these things, we do need to get more involved in whatever way possible. So yeah, okay. So I think just to reflect what I'm hearing back is the working group members are proposing to give a 72-hour time box to the author to address the concerns that were raised today, and then to make another vote on whether to approve the NEP in its current state, to accept and move it forward, or to reject it. If we reject it, that means we close that NEP, and then somebody would have to reauthor a new NEP, with whatever other idea or fix that they would like to propose. So, and this is to avoid us continuing circular discussions on this NEP for many more months. So it's kind of like, if we really want to get this NEP approved, we need the author to address these concerns in 72 hours, working group members to say, yep, these concerns have been addressed and move forward, or not. Did I hear the working group correctly? And does that sound like a reasonable path?
Yes, I think so.
Okay. Awesome. So, and then to answer Ken's question, yeah, I think we are basically doing like a maybe yes with contingency. And, I know that the current graph doesn't reflect this particular edge case, but again, we're experimenting, we're bootstrapping. So if we realize that this is a case that we come across many more times, maybe we revisit that process. But I think to Marcin's point, I think we want to make sure that we're spending more time in the actual NEP review to kind of avoid this situation when we get to the voting. So, all right, cool. All right, so we have 5 minutes left. Are there any burning questions from anyone? We can skip over to the Q&A part. Or other ideas for what you'd like to see from this process. Okay. We'll make sure to take notes of everything that was surfaced today and to address that. So thank you for all of the great input so far. So just to close, I want to talk about getting involved and ways to get more engaged in the process. So the first step, obviously, is if you have an idea, please go ahead and author and submit a NEP. If you want to see other NEPs that are going on, as I mentioned, we do have the Kanban board on GitHub. It's under the project section that kind of highlights some of the NEPs that are going on. These are some of the NEPs that are currently for the protocol working group. So feel free to join discussions of existing NEPs, make comments, add your concerns. We definitely want to hear about them in the NEPs as early as possible. And then lastly, if you don't necessarily know what you want to build, or you just want to discuss ideas in general with other people, I highly recommend that you join the protocol community group. Yeah, and then lastly, we will be posting this call on the developer governance website, as well as other meetings and other NEPs. So that's a really good place to kind of keep up to date. But also, as I mentioned, we have our Twitter account near DevGov, where we also are trying to communicate more regularly about what's happening. All right, so with that, I would like to give a huge shout out to the authors for all the effort that you've put into this NEP and the discussion today. And that's Ilya, Igor, and Alexander, the working group members for engaging as well, Bowen, Marcin, Alex, Marcelo, and then the community and everyone else who has participated. We definitely want to continue to look at more proposals and make things better, but it does take a lot of coordination and alignment. And so this is a healthy part of the process for us to continue to figure this out together.